every word, perfectly weighted on a thin piece of paper. Would it make any difference? Would it change for the better if I wrote you a poem, if I posted a letter?
So a very good morning and welcome back to another video, and in this one I want to talk about a photography technique that I often use. It's called exposing to the right, otherwise known as deliberately overexposing your photographs. Let's get stuck in and I'll talk to you about why I do it. Okay, so this is my camera. This is my Olympus EM1 Mark II, and inside of this there is something called the light meter, and what it does is it reads all of the light that is coming through the lens and it finds your exposure for you. Or should I say, it puts you in the ballpark of where your exposure should be. It's exposing for the highlights, it's exposing for the shadows, and it's putting it right down the middle. Nothing's been clipped. But if you've ever looked at where your light meter needle falls and the histogram side by side, you'll often notice that there's just a little bit of extra room that you can squeeze to the right hand side, and that is where we're going to throw all of the photographs today. This technique really does help with post-processing. So what we're doing, we're shoving everything to the right hand side, almost to the point of clipping the highlights, but not quite, and that's going to give us enough light in the shadows to enable us to recover them in post-processing without throwing some ugly noise in there. So this is all about post-processing, it's all about recovering shadows, and it's all about getting as much light into the lens as possible without overexposing the image completely. So let's get the camera set up and I'll show you this technique in practice. Alright, so I've got something set up on the camera now, and if you look at where the light meter needle is, it's falling right down the middle, giving us f9 and 2.5 seconds. But if you look towards the right hand side of the histogram, there is just a little bit of extra room that we can squeeze in there. The histogram is just not quite clipping at the right hand side, so we can squeeze a little bit more exposure time out of this here. So let me show you this on the back of the camera and we'll take the photograph. Alright, so here we are on the back of the camera, so you can see 2.5 seconds, f9. There's the histogram, we've got all of that room left on the right hand side. So let's take the photograph at 2.5 seconds and I'll show you the histogram on the playback button on this because it's a little bit easier to see. So there you go, there's the histogram. There's this histogram look, and we've got all this room on the right hand side. I think we can squeeze another stop and a little bit out of this photograph. So if we just expose, let's go, so 5 seconds will be a stop, and I think we can maybe squeeze 6 out of this. Let's go, 2 second timer, a 6 second exposure now. So this is a stop and a little bit. If I press the play now, you see we're all the way to the right hand side, but we're just not quite there. There was a little gap before everything's clipped. Nothing is blinking at me, so the sky is still recoverable, but the dark posts, we're going to get a lot more detail out of them in post-processing. Alright, so far all I've really demonstrated here is the long exposure stuff, but it doesn't just pertain to that. You can use this technique in any kind of photography. So we've moved up onto the beam here. We're going to face the opposite direction because out to sea it's just mucky, flat and grey, and there seems to be some sort of fog or mist sort of rolling in off the sea, and it's just looking a bit icky. So at least up here, if we face the other way, well, there's going to be some interest in the sky. It'll make for a little bit more of an interesting photograph. So we're going to swap out for the long lens. We're going to take a photograph of the lighthouses, which are just behind me, over in that direction. So yeah, let's get set up and take another photo. Alright, so I've got the photograph sort of set up now. We've got the lighthouse in the middle of the frame. There's a little bit of interest in the sky, and I'm kind of thinking a black and white photograph for this one. There's a little bit of a haze still off in the distance, so everything's a little bit soft looking. I thought we'll go a little bit artsy-fartsy, go black and white with this. So we're at 100th of a second and f9. That is the base exposure. So like I was saying, I think we can squeeze a little bit more out of that. So we're going to give it another stop of light. We're going to go down to a 50th of a second. So here we go. High resolution shooting mode is on. The 4 second countdown timer. Let's see how this turns out. So some of this mist out to sea seems to be blowing away now. There's a little bit of cloud appearing, some texture, some detail up there. And when I was down on the beach earlier on, I saw something and it gave me an idea. There was an old, I think it's maybe a root cluster from a tree, but I kind of have considered dragging it into the surf and taking a photograph of it. The only problem is it's right at this end of the beach. So it would mean dragging it, which is going to be fun, isn't it? That's sort of really dark cluster of roots in the surf. Maybe get an exposure time around a second and a half, get some texture in the water as it goes around it. There's a little gap appearing in the clouds on the horizon now. I kind of thought if we can get that in there, it might make for an interesting photograph. It's effort though, isn't it? It's effort. I'll tell you what, let's do it. Let's drag the roots to the surf, take a photograph of the roots. I've got a 7.5mm f2.8 manual lens with me. I haven't actually used it yet, and I'm kind of thinking that lens for this, like an ultra wide angle, really sort of distort everything, get it real big in the frame and all that stuff. Tell you what, let's do it. Let's go drag this root thing down there and see how this photograph turns out. Alright, so the root cluster is now in the surf, and I just kind of realised I can't use the 7.5mm lens because it doesn't actually take filter threads. It's one of them fisheye ones. Boo. So I'm just going to have to use the wide end of the 12mm lens, aka 24mm on the 12 to 14. Now one thing that is going to be interesting over the next week or so is now that them roots are in the surf, is on the local Facebook page, is just how many photographs of that appear. It's a bit like that around here, especially at Spurn Point, because there's not a right lot else to shoot around here. So when something new appears, people tend to get excited about it. So yeah, let's get set up anyway. Let's take a long exposure of these roots and see what we can do with them. All right, so we're set up here. So we've got the roots in the surf. I've put the 10-stop filter on, and I've also put a polarizing filter on just to get rid of the reflection of the roots and all of the wet sand around here. So now it's just a case of waiting for a big enough wave to come and wash around it. I want to time it so we can get the wave retreated so it leaves them nice white streaks in the sands. There's one. The wave's just washed over it. 2-second timer as everything retreats. There we go, that looks quite nice. So 2.5 seconds, f4.5, ISO 200 with a polarizer and a 10-stop filter. I'll tell you what, some of these old wooden posts around here, they make for some really nice long exposure, minimalistic subjects, sort of some photographs, which would look really nice hanging on people's walls. Which is convenient, I should mention that, because I've recently set up an Etsy shop. There is a link available in the description of this video, and it's also in the banner at the top if you're watching this on desktop. It's not a store I've really shouted and screamed about too much, but some of the prints are available and the photographs are available from my recent YouTube videos, and maybe one or two from today's video may end up on there as well if you like them. So thank you very much for watching today. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope earlier on I showed you a nice technique just to squeeze a little bit more detail out of the shadows in your photographs. I've enjoyed myself this morning. It's the first time I've really been out and put this camera and lens combination through its paces. It's kind of new to me, and yeah, it seems to be holding up quite well, and I'm not missing selling the Canon gear at all at this point. So thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please do give it a thumbs up because it really does help the video and it brings you views to see my content. And if you liked it more than that and you're new here, please do consider subscribing. There is a button just down there below. Press subscribe and you see more nonsense from me every single week. So until next week, I love you and leave you and say peace and goodbye.